All right. Well, welcome. This is the Free Speech Coalition Live, and we are having our first edition. Today we are meeting with Amy Kastely. Thank you for coming. Yes, of course. Well, Amy Kastely, if you don't know her already, she's an attorney. She's also a law professor for over 30 years, and she is also a pro bono attorney for many community organizations, including, it's been about 10 years since we've had the International Women's Day March and the San Antonio Free Speech Coalition versus the City of San Antonio. And Amy was our pro bono attorney for that. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, so today we're going to talk about the Free Speech Coalition and the activities that we are having, happening in the community right now. So can you let us know what is the community experiencing right now under the current ordinances that govern our use of public space here in the city?
Well, the Free Speech Coalition really came together and reassembled itself because the current San Antonio ordinances are so restrictive on our use of public space. The use for various forms of marches, demonstrations, and cultural and religious events is very restrictive in San Antonio. The ways in which it's restrictive is really that the ordinances are very unclear, and they grant enormous discretion to the permitting agencies. In the case of a street march, that's the police department. Mm-hmm. In the case of the parks, that's the parks department. Right. Or the downtown city development office, or various other organizations. There were some demonstrations at the airport, and that's governed by an airport board.
So there's a lot of different areas you have to go to.
A lot of different areas, and if you get yourself to the ordinances to read them, you can't understand what the requirements are or how you can get a permit.
So it's very unclear. Right now there's a lot of folks that are experiencing problems trying to access our public spaces in this city.
And not only that, but under the ordinances and under the enormous discretion granted to these agencies, applicants are being told, or people who even express an interest in having an event in the public space, are being told that it's going to cost them $7,000, $10,000, a prohibitive amount for most.
And that's, we're talking about your right to speak out, your right to have your voice heard here in San Antonio. And what they're telling us is it's going to cost $7,000, $10,000, sometimes more. So, that's just, we're fighting against that right now.
Exactly. Not free speech, but even more important, not access to the public space, which traditionally is the place where we do democracy, where we engage with each other and discuss issues and become participants in our own governance. That's really been cut off.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing is that, so what's happening is folks that are trying to raise an issue into public discourse, they're facing these barriers and they're deciding, look, this is way too difficult, this is costing us too much, we're just going to cancel it.
That's right. A lot of events have been canceled. The traditional posadas on the west side, I know many of them have been canceled. Or the police have really sort of pressured people into having marches on the sidewalk, which involves a whole other set of problems, including the lack of access for the disabled or the elderly. It's very dangerous to have a group of people trying to demonstrate on the sidewalk. And so that's really not a viable alternative for most events.
And so just like you said, it affects issues that we're trying to raise and cultural activities that we've grown up with.
Yeah, part of San Antonio.
Exactly, and so for all of y'all listening out there, it is something that we're trying to fight against. That we don't want our cultural activities, limited. We don't want our access to public spaces and our access to having our voice heard out there in San Antonio. Next question is, so right now, this is this is affecting all of us. This
Yes.
is essentially affecting cultural organizations, religious organizations, and affecting folks that organize rallies and marches. What about these rallies and demonstrations? How are they tied into what we're doing?
Well, again, they're under a difference, an array of ordinances. But when the Trump immigration ban, or the visa ban, came down, a lot of people went to the airport to demonstrate, as was happening all across the country, and they were turned away. They were told that they had to apply for a permit and go through a lot of rigmarole, and that shouldn't have happened. They should have been allowed to express their opinion about the ban right away.
Right, and so eventually, that was one of the things that brought up
Right.
the issue that we're facing.
So we're talking, I'm sorry, to get back to, we're talking about processions, which is under the parade ordinance or the procession ordinance, but we're also talking about stable, or they call static, stationary gatherings of people. So that could be in a park, it could be on a sidewalk, it could be at the airport, it could be in front of the Alamo, it could be in any place that is a traditionally open to the public in San Antonio.
Okay, and so now that groups have come together, individuals and groups, the Free Speech Coalition, if you don't know already out there, we are 30 plus organizations strong. And so a lot of folks are jumping on board to really address how the city of San Antonio is impacting democracy. How are we trying to promote democracy here in San Antonio? And the dialogue that's needed to make good decisions in our government. And so right now we want to talk about where are we going? What is our coalition trying to achieve? Because we're going to propose something to the city of San Antonio.
Right. And we're hopeful. We're hopeful that this city council will decide to make changes that will make the public space accessible. Mm-hmm. What we're asking is for a consolidated system, so that if you're applying for a static, stationary gathering or for a procession down the public streets, you would go to one office and submit a permit. Or you could submit it online. That's one of the problems. You can't get the permit application, and you have to go and meet with the police department under the current law. So we're asking for there to be an online access and also an office making the decisions that's separate from the police department. The other major problem is the cost. Under the current ordinance for the processions, the applicant has to pay for police services, often or usually under the police contract, overtime wages, and we are required to engage with private companies to rent traffic barriers. And all of that is used to sort of isolate whatever demonstration is happening from the community. Right. And so it's expensive, and it's also counterproductive in terms of what it is that people are wanting to do, which is to express their opinions. Right.
And what we did was we looked at other organizations, right? We looked at other cities that have ordinances governing processions and rallies and First Amendment activities. And among all of the ones that we looked at across the United States and across Texas, San Antonio was the worst.
Well, it's the worst in Texas, and it's among the worst in the nation. There are a few other cities that are similar to San Antonio nationally, but the big cities, the New York, LA, Chicago, what we would call world-class cities, are much more welcoming of free speech than San Antonio is right now.
And San Antonio does not want to be among the worst. We don't want to be at the bottom of that list. We want to be a leader in promoting democracy. We want to be a leader in promoting dialogue that leads to good decisions within our government, so that folks, very often what happens is that it seems like people feel like they're not being heard. Right. People feel that their government is so difficult to interact with, that they're disenfranchised very often because they don't feel engaged and connected to.
Absolutely.
And what we're trying to do with this effort with the Free Speech Coalition is to capture some of the energy of democracy, to bring it alive in San Antonio, and to help promote the expression of political speech and of dialogue and of issues that are important.
Absolutely.
Impact us every day.
It's super disheartening to try to go to the government website or the San Antonio City website and try to find out information about how to use the public space, about how to apply for a permit. It's clear that if you want to apply for a development permit, there's lots of things available and many instructions and everything else. Same thing if you want a burglar alarm. But if you want to express yourself, there's nothing. And it's as if our city government just has no place within its structure to allow citizens to advance their own goals in terms of their expression and their participation.
And so we're trying to have the city of San Antonio designate one office that would govern the permitting, or really the informing of the public on how they can engage in and access public spaces.
That's right. And we also want to have a public, limited set of criteria that would be applied by that office in deciding whether a permit should be permitted. There would be very few reasons why you should not get a permit, and you should be able to determine the audience that you want to reach and a reasonable manner in which you can reach that audience. And the city ought to be permitting that application, those applications and those projects, in order to be clear to everybody, the police included, that this is a legal exercise of free speech and ought not to be interfered with.
Right, and very often when you go and access a permit for a public march or for a march, that would mean that you're protected under this ordinance, that there are certain protections that you have under the First Amendment.
That's right. I mean, under our current ordinances, and typically in any city, there are rules that you can't block traffic. There are rules that you can't block a sidewalk. We're not objecting to those. But if you've got a permit and you are expressing and exercising your First Amendment rights, you should be immune from arrest under those municipal ordinances.
Right. Well, and there's definitely a lot of organizing that's happening right now to make sure these things are taking place. We wanted to make sure that we kept the conversation alive here in San Antonio about free speech, about access to public spaces, about having your voice heard. And so, I'm not sure. Could you tell me? Are we right at 5 minutes? Are we?
We're going on 14.
Oh, we're going. we spoke quite a bit. All right. So then, what we're going to do
but we want to say, call your councilman.
Okay.
Right? If you think that these ordinances need to be changed, call your council representative and let them know that you agree with the Free Speech Coalition.
Exactly. So we're organizing in different city council districts. You can join your neighbors and have your voice heard to your city council member. Please look at our Facebook page at SA Free Speech Coalition. And from there you can get a lot of different pieces of information. We also have a petition. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up right now. We have a petition that is being circulated right now. So go to that page. You can have access to this petition. Start filling it out. You and your neighbors, you and your coworkers, and folks that you work with within your community. So fill it out, and there's a way that you can get it back to us so you can get plugged in to our coalition. So I wanted to ask, do you have any final comments that you want to make?
No, I look forward to talking with more of the San Antonio community and encourage them to support this initiative.
Exactly. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done. We hope that we've communicated all the important points. Again, resources are available on our Facebook page. And please, share this video and let other folks know about what we're doing and what's happening in San Antonio with free speech. All right. Thank you all.
so we can share as much information as possible. I guess the two things that we did want to talk about, one is the application time. So under the current ordinance.
Do you want to start it again? Or?
I am starting, it is going right now, so if you kind of,
Under the current ordinance, you must apply 30 days in advance. And then there are a bunch of provisions that essentially allow the police, or the chief of police or his delegate, to waive that requirement down to 2 days. That whole process of waiving stuff is problematic again. You know,
arbitrary.
It's really arbitrary. It just can't help but be exercised in a way that's unfair to some. So we're asking for a shorter time frame. That's point one. And you know, we think that a week or it should be fine, or even down to 2 days is a regular matter. The second point is, this year in San Antonio and other locations across the country, we have frequently seen expressions of protest or demonstration that come about, what we would say, spontaneously in response to, in this case, the federal government's actions. So when the visa ban was announced, people went right away. When the DACA provisions were ordered to cease, people responded right away. And in those cases, what we would define as spontaneous expressions of, spontaneous actions designed to express or assemble people together in opposition or in support of something, that those should be automatically protected without the process of permit making. There's no realistic time to allow a permit that is for protected speech, and the police ought to have their own operating procedures requiring them to abstain from any arrests or any interference with that kind of exercise of free speech.
Right. And that's happened a lot recently,
absolutely.
When there have been very controversial issues brought up to, brought into the public discourse, and people react. And we want to know, and we want folks to be rest assured that that's what we're fighting for as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Were there other issues that are important that we
I
need
don't
to
think
hear?
so. I think my final thought is that the First Amendment law, or jurisprudence, as we'd say, the precedent in the First Amendment, is hugely complex. Okay, and lawyers love to argue First Amendment, but the point for the coalition is that, as you said, we want our city government to be ahead of the pack. There's nothing that precludes the city from being more protective of speech than the First Amendment as it's now interpreted by the courts. Okay, so I think the city of San Antonio needs to do what is right, what is best for the encouragement of free speech, and not get engrossed in the intricacies of First Amendment jurisprudence. Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're like they say, I'm going to get the quote wrong, but the arc of time bends towards justice,
Right,
and so when we need to seek the path as a city of San Antonio that will help us get towards justice, towards that end goal, which means that we're being more welcoming to more people. We are opening the process of democratic dialogue and decision making to more people, so that we'll ultimately be a more democratic society, a more representative of the will and the experiences of our people. So yeah, I'm with us on that.